So yep, just to reintroduce myself, I'm Carly. I'm a branch manager for Jackson District Library. I've been working for the library for 6 years about. I tend to read a lot of science fiction and fantasy, but I also read widely, so a lot of nonfiction, to a lot of general fiction. I read kids and like middle grade books. I'm trying to get more into YA, but today mostly I'm going to focus on science fiction for myself. And then so we have our co-host Nia, and our guest today is Aubrie. So starting with Nia, why don't you introduce yourself for our attendees?
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Dania. I am a library assistant at the Carnegie branch in downtown Jackson. I mostly read nonfiction. I tend to focus on like books that revolve around social issues, science, philosophy, that kind of stuff. But I'm always trying to kind of expand and get outside of that.
Great. And yeah, you're my new co-host. So moving forward, you'll see Dania quite a bit in future episodes of book tasting. And then today we have a very special guest. We're so happy to have you, Aubrie. Welcome to the book tasting program. Would you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Aubrie. I usually work at the Eastern branch, but since we're closed for remodeling, single tier, I've been working at the Summit branch, so you might have seen me there. Um, I went to school for illustration for digital art and design with a focus in comics. So like that's my kind of my go-to thing. I usually like to my like main interest is in like work that is made for children. And so the stuff that I've selected, I've got some like children's book-y thing and some various art sorts of things. So that's kind of my big stuff.
Perfect. Well, and aren't you
Awesome.
a published illustrator?
Technically, I guess. So my partner did an anthology that we have in the library, and I did help with some of the shading and the bubbles. So my name is on the work as well. But I can't take all the credit because they did an absolutely amazing job, and I just kind of was along for the ride.
Well, we are so happy to have you with us today, Aubrie. I'm really excited to do some readers advisory, chit chat with each other, talk about some of the things we've read recently, maybe talk about some of the things we're reading or planning on reading if we have the time. So I'd like to get started. I think we're starting with Nia.
Yeah, so I'm starting with a book that's very personal for me, and at the risk of being a little bit of a cheater in this, I'm going to recommend it to everyone. And I do that for a couple of reasons. One, because it's a really easily approachable book. It's charming, relatable, it's easy to read. Amanda's a great writer. Their style is very silly, cute, a lot of funny stories, a little cheesy almost. But the style fits well with the stories of the book because it's a memoir. And it's a story of a very normal family dealing with very normal family stuff, with self-doubt, stress, raising kids, the eyes of one's neighbor on your lawn mowing habits, but also intense love and the kind of happiness and in spite of imperfection that I think we can all kind of relate to searching for. So I will be spoiling this a little bit, but because it's a true story, I don't think it's as big of an issue. And I think what makes this book special is in a lot of the details of the stories and the way that they tell it. It kind of starts off with Amanda when they were young. Amanda had kind of a rough childhood, kind of a bullied outcast, driven from school to school with not very many friends. They talk about addiction, becoming independent at 16 and struggling for a lot of years. They started a family early, and at every step in the journey, they're humble and realistic about their strengths and their weaknesses and their faults and struggles. And I think for me, one of the most important things in life is not being perfect, but like always trying to be better and trying to kind of follow up. And so like I think this book kind of reflects that that desire really well. So let's see. Basically, this book hinges around their family had a child, and she was struggling for a lot of years with serious mental health issues until she was able to come out as transgender to her family. And Amanda didn't really know how to handle that at first. It was kind of, there was a lot of learning to it, kind of some bad reactions at first, a lot of stumbling along the way, occasionally misgendering and all that stuff that I think cisgender listeners can sort of relate to. But the whole way they're trying to be better and they're learning how to be their daughter's number one advocate and to, support her. And so I think that's reflects one of the ultimate points of the book, which is love and change. And so they get to this point where they are doing much better and they're being an advocate for their kid and they're fighting a lot. And then another bombshell happens and their wife comes out. And once again, even though you would think going through a similar experience, it would be easy this time, it's a whole nother experience that they have to, work through. And after a lot of tough conversations, moments of weakness, the threat of the family kind of falling apart, they eventually reach a place where they're kind of able to let the love in their family sprout anew and sort of get through the scary parts and build a new life that is much more rooted in honesty and love and caring and all that. And so yeah, I think that it's a refreshing human look at their story. I laughed a lot reading this book. I cried a lot, and I think that other people will enjoy it as much as I did.
And I love all the hope in the title. Love lives here. Like, that's such a kind and hopeful title. That's great.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's definitely going on my list of things to read for no reason. Totally not an issue that I like to read about or deal with every day or nothing.
Yeah.
Now, some of our watchers and readers might find this relevant and useful, and some of them might just enjoy a good story of family.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, well, I think what's nice about it is, like I said, sort of the being able to look honestly at yourself and realizing that, it's not about being perfect, but like just about listening and caring and all this. And it's interesting because Amanda, they're a writer and an activist. They do a lot of activism work in Canada, but they also have kind of, through taking these journeys with their family members, have also kind of made their own sort of journey and progress. So it's not just about like learning and being better for the people around us, but also kind of understanding ourselves a little better as well.
that's great.
Yeah.
All right, your next title?
Yes. So my next title is Dread Nation by Justina Ireland. Oh, by the way, Amanda Jet Knox. I know it's said there, but I didn't say it in the last one. But yeah, next one is Dread Nation by Justina Ireland. And so this was a novel that I purchased as a gift years ago for my partner. We were kind of trying to read more material by queer and Black authors, and this book's author is both. But what really drew me to it was like the concept of it, because it's an alternative history / horror thriller novel, which takes place a few years after the US Civil War. The main difference, though, is unlike in our world, the US Civil War ends when the dead start walking. And what came to my mind first when I saw this was like the, what are they called? The Quirk Classics series of books. Your Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, your Jane Slayer, your Mansfield Park and Mummies. And while I haven't read those books, my partner enjoys them, and I've heard good things about them. So with that in mind, I tried out this book, probably many years too late, but I really enjoyed it. And what I liked about it, there's a lot that I liked about it, but one thing was that it makes some really poignant commentary on the post-Civil War, like the Reconstruction period and the racial tensions that existed then, and in many ways still do. It's not super on the nose or preachy necessarily, for lack of a better word, but it touches on issues of colorism, the 13th Amendment of the US Constitution, Black laws, lingering white supremacy, by presenting this sort of different caste system where Black Americans are trained to be the defenders of society from the zombie or shambler, in this case, apocalypse. They're trained in special schools and pushed into these fighting roles that still kind of tether them to labor and sacrifice for white folks. And so slavery is ended, but has it really? And it's kind of an interesting message that I think you can draw a lot of real world parallels from. The atmosphere, the setting, the characters of the book, they all feel very familiar and real, and everything just kind of gets subsumed so well into the narrative and your subconscious as you're reading it, that you're just kind of left turning page after page and rooting for Jane McKean, the main character, and her friends, and wondering what'll happen next. And so I think if you like thrilling stories, if you like history and that feeling of not quite knowing whether the real monsters are the monsters themselves or the people surviving them, I think you'll love this book. It's the pacing's perfect in my view. It kept you in like the right headspace the whole time, so that you always know the stakes and you get a satisfying payoff that, so that when things are wrapped up, or rather, as much as they can be in the first book in a series, because it's a duology. And we also have the second book in the series, which is called Deathless Divide. And so, yeah, those are both in our collection if anybody's interested in checking those.
That sounds fascinating. I love how science fantasy, that kind of medium, like it's fun to have like a fun, thrilling adventure, fantastical story, but to have them used to dissect or reflect or explore ideas in that kind of way that it looks like this does, it's a double whammy.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the most powerful things about literature, is like, even for me as somebody who mostly reads nonfiction, because for whatever reason I just can't help but be bogged down in like the really academic stuff all the time. I think that there's a lot that we can learn about ourselves and about humanity and about real history and real issues by exploring literature.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm going to add that to my list. That's the problem with these programs. I do so many programs with Reader's Advisory and hearing like what people are reading and what they're interested in, and my list just gets so long.
Yeah, my to read list is enormous.
Yeah, same.
Okay, so what's next?
All right, so the last book that I'm going to talk about today is The Power of Style by Christian Allaire. And this book was actually suggested by you, Carly, and I'm really excited to share it because so this book talks about the way that fashion is tied into culture and how it can be an important tool for understanding culture and for connecting with culture. So I have the book here next to me. It's essentially split into 6 parts. It's got starting with Christian Allaire, who his family are members of the Ojibwe tribe in the Nipissing region of Ontario. And he wanted to connect more with his like grandparents and stuff. And so he did that through ribbon art, which is an important fashion medium for his family and for his cultural traditions. And so that's kind of the jumping off point of the book and where the headspace is throughout the whole thing. So you've got that. The second chapter is essentially about Black hairstyles, the way that a Black person's hair often can hold really interesting like cultural signifiers that one might not think of if they're not a Black person. The person that was interviewed there, I should say that there's a lot of interviews with people from these groups so that you can give a lot of nice context for it and everything. And the person who was interviewed for this, let me find her name, Shalene Knight. She's the president of the Breathing Space Creative Literary Studio. And she had a quote that I put here about what it means to have natural hair. She said, quote, "Growing up in a Black family and being mixed race, my father's East Indian, I was often singled out as being the ideal in terms of my hair. In other situations and circumstances outside of family, it was seen as, and I hate to use this word, exotic. That always bothered me." And so that's kind of where it goes from there. And then the rest of the book is following different groups. It goes from there to cosplayers, to hijabs, to heels, like high-heeled shoes, specifically for men and non-binary folks. And then just kind of a more general like makeup relating to different cultures. And so this book is great because even if you, it's really easy and fast to read. I think I read through it the first time in like an hour or two, maybe. Lots of pictures, lots of really like cool interviews with a lot of interesting people in different fashion industries. So if you are really busy, a really busy person that doesn't get a lot of time for reading, but you love things like fashion and culture, this is a great book to pick up, even if you just want to flip through it for the pictures. I loved the section on hijabs because there's an interesting thing that a lot of people I don't think about, which is that hijabs are a great way for people to sort of reclaim their modesty and their bodily autonomy and sort of express themselves. And some of these like hijabs in the book, the pictures of them, absolutely like breathtaking. Like they're just absolutely beautiful.
Wow.
So, yep.
I'm so glad you liked that book.
I really
thought
did.
you might.
I've read through it a couple times at this point. Like every once in a while I just take it out and I kind of keep it on my table to kind of flip through.
I'm so glad to hear it. Yeah, it's a pretty powerful little book. I mean, it packs quite a lot for being, it's like you said, pretty quick to read. But there's a lot of information and just there's a lot of beauty in it. So I think a lot of people would find something to be interested in this book.
I agree.
My partner they're going to school for neuroscience and they're super into like neuroaesthetics. And they just did like a whole bunch of like reporting and stuff about fashion and like this like very thing. And so I just sent a picture to them to be like, you might like this. So yeah, it sounds super interesting and I'm sure they're immediately going to pick it up.
Yeah, it really is great. Yeah, super easy to read. I recommend it a lot. So
well, one of the things I like about it too is even if you're not going into it like looking for the cultural context, if you are just a person who's interested in fashion and enjoys just fashion in your everyday life, like there's a lot in there too. But also it can help people be more sensitive or understanding, or even just to acknowledge where's none of us live in a vacuum. Yeah.
Yeah.
So even if your interest in fashion is just like for yourself and not necessarily from a cultural like context or framework, there's still information that'll be fun and surprising.
Yeah, absolutely. And because I think we live in such like not just like the world in general, but Jackson as well has such a diverse population. And I think that there can be a tendency sometimes to kind of lean towards like a sort of assimilationist attitude and kind of wanting everything to get a one cultural type. But I think the more we can embrace and understand how much variety and there is in the way people express themselves, it's always a good thing. So.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite things about Jackson is seeing all of the different kinds, especially because people think that we are a very small place where everybody's all the same. But then when you're actually here, there's so many different kinds of people and everybody's interested in so many different things. And you can have a conversation with somebody about anything and they'll dress whichever way. And it's a very cool place, really, even if people don't think so.
No, I
think so.
agree. Jackson feels like a really big little city.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those were my 3 selections. You can kind of see trying to branch out a little bit from what I would normally read, but I'm happy that I did. These are all great picks. Go and check them out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nia. I'm so glad.
Mhm.
Now, I think you are up next, Aubrie, so we're really excited to see what you brought for us today.
So I started with I kind of like went with like youngest to like oldest sorts of thing, like for my 3 options, my 3 picks. And so my first one is a book called The Creature of Habit. It is an adorable little picture book. And as somebody who has a tendency to be a creature of habit, I really enjoyed it. You follow this little monster as he does the same thing every day, and then all of a sudden he meets a new little monster who does different things all the time and who doesn't do the same schedule as this guy does. And he's like, oh god, like all flustered, what do I do, what's happening? But he has to learn, like, sometimes it's okay to step out of your usual schedule, your usual routine, and learn new things and try something new, and that can be very fun and rewarding. And just because somebody is maybe more spontaneous than you, that doesn't mean you can't get along. And I have always been a very like, this is my routine, I'm going to do the thing, if I plan it this way, this is how it's going to get done. But I do really enjoy spending time with other people who aren't like that, because it's a very different perspective, and it is kind of freeing. So I kind of wish that I would have had a book like this as a kid, just to be like, oh, other people do other stuff and that's still fun. But it's very cute. So if you have a kid who likes to do that same thing every day, that might be a good sort of thing for them to be like, oh.
Well, I'm furiously writing this down for my nephews. So.
It's super cute, and the artwork is adorable. I mean, look at the cover.
Yeah, it's immediately grabs your attention. It's so sweet.
Very sweet.
Yeah, I definitely found myself kind of smiling when I was looking at this book and kind of reading the synopsis of it a little bit. And I was happy that you said what you did, because I'm the same thing. Like, I'm definitely a creature of habit, and I'm always kind of trying to get myself to be a little more adventurous. But I don't know, it's fun to kind of see yourself in such a cute little book like that.
Yeah. It's fun to kind of put yourself into these little, I think that's one of the very fun things about children's books too, is you are looking at these silly little creatures, but you are connecting to them, and you're supposed to be like seeing the things that you do reflected, or not even necessarily reflected. Sometimes you're seeing someone else's experience. So like if my sister read this book as a kid, it would be a very different thing for her. It would be her looking at my life and going, oh, you do the same thing every day. You're that kind of person. I'm super spontaneous. I'm this other character. So it's, always interesting and cool to see like what kinds of little things they put in these fun little kids books. So
well, that's really cute.
Yeah, so I think I can go to the next one. So
Perfect.
this is Infinity Train. It's probably my favorite show of all time. I love animation. Say I went to school for it. I'm a big fan. So we have 2 of the seasons, or books that they call them, in our collection at the library. Unfortunately, the last 2 seasons were never put into DVD.
Oh.
But the first 2 are still fantastic and worth watching. And basically each season follows a different character. And there's 10 episodes where they are traveling on this mysterious train that seems to go on forever. And they go through each car, and each car has different environments and different little characters inside, and you have to solve little puzzles, or the characters get to solve little puzzles, and they are learning more about themselves and about this world. The first season kind of sets up the idea for the world, and it has kind of a basic like main character storyline. And then as you go further and further, like with the rest of the seasons, it gets more complex because you already know how the world works. You don't need to like learn how the train functions. You just get to see these characters learning about themselves and the world that they're in. And a little bit of a spoiler, like the point of the train when you get on is to like basically solve your like main problems. You get a number on your hand, and you have to like through your journey, like a hero's quest, sort of like find your things that have bothered you or kept you from meeting your full potential. The second season is my favorite, and the main characters are really fun and really cute, and they do a thing where like in the first season you meet the first main character, and then about like halfway through you meet somebody else, and that's the person who you follow the second season. And then the same thing in the third season, like they meet somebody in the season before. The only one that doesn't do that is the fourth one, but that one is like a prequel, so there's still characters that you know that show up in that season, but it's super fun. It's one of my favorites. It's a very much like a character study, but it's really interesting and fun and fantastical. And it's so cute. Also, the first season has a corgi as one of the main characters.
I mean, I will always take a
talks.
corgi character.
So, yeah.
Great. These look really cute, Aubrie.
Yeah, it's really fun.
What's next?
So what's next is a book that I have been carrying for a while now. So right before East closed, I did a zine program. And so I checked out a bunch of materials that were like talking about making comics and talking about like making little booklets, because that's, I guess most people don't know what a zine is. It's a little booklet that a lot of people will have like little comics, or they'll do poetry, or they'll have little art, or they'll do collage, or information, like just a little informational booklet. So I was getting ready to do that, and I checked out all these materials, and I picked out this book just based on the name of it, Making Comics. And I accidentally stumbled into basically my new obsession, which is so the book itself is a guide for a class that the author Lynda teaches, and she is an artist, an illustrator, and a professor, and she I think in 2019 was awarded the Genius Grant for her work, which is like basically like if you are somebody who is making amazing strides, or like doing really creative out of the box sort of things, you get this grant, and you get to keep working, do more stuff. And so basically in the book, she's laying out the lessons that she teaches for the class, the like basic setup for it, the supplies you need, stuff like that. And I started doing it, and I super love it. I basically, anytime I hang out with friends, I'm like, hey, do you want to do one of these drawing activities with me? It's And
That's
it's
so
a really
cool.
good book for not just people who are artists, but people who maybe have always wanted to draw, even not like super well, or because like, I mean, you can look at the cover, it's not like um stereotypically beautiful, I suppose, but it is art. And art can be a lot of things. It can be so many things. And it's kind of like she's trying to help people, like guide them through tapping into like the essence of communication and using art as a way to communicate. So you're doing these little activities where you're like just getting like the fastest little things that you can possibly like draw as quickly as possible. I'm gonna find, because this is my little like drawing journal. There's one that I did to start that was, you have to draw on a cat as quickly as possible. So there's like, you do it for 60 seconds, 45 seconds, 30 seconds, 10, 5 seconds. And you have to do like all that you possibly can. I'll see if I can get it to, it doesn't want to, it hates it. It's like,
Oh
no.
no.
Here, I'll unblur my background because that's what it's mad at. Don't blur my background. Okay. But there's, so like the first one, he's like a little cat, you see him perfectly
Cute.
fine. And as the time goes down and down, he changes a little bit in his shape, but he still looks like a cat, even in the very
Yeah.
last one.
I love him.
So it's this very interesting sort of process of working through the messy parts of drawing that a lot of times we get embarrassed about when we're doing drawing. We're like, oh gosh, this is terrible, don't look at it. But that doesn't matter. It's just doing it. That's the part that we're focusing on. So it's been very cool, and I'm getting ready to go and study art therapy, and I'm hoping to maybe integrate some of the stuff that I've learned from these books into it as well. So it's really powerful, really cool stuff.
That is so cool. And when I saw that you were planning on highlighting this book, I was really, really happy. And I tried to find the drawings that I did, and I can't find them. But I do not consider myself to be like a drawing or paint, like I'm not a fine artist in that way at all. And when this book was new, I grabbed it off the shelf and I took it home and I did some of it, and it was so fun.
Yeah, the one little activity that I basically pick up all the time with friends is you draw monsters out of scribbles, and you do it really fast. And then, so usually I'll have it like, we pass our books around and we'll draw our little monsters in each other's books. And then at the end of it, you have like a list of like little questions or prompts that you have to answer, that are like, oh, just write a sentence. And then you have to, out of those sentences, you have to assign them to a monster who looks like they would be saying that sentence. It's such a quirky little thing, but it lends itself really well to like being creative in a way that you wouldn't necessarily expect. And I really liked that about it. So I ended up doing that with pretty much every group of friends that I'm with, being like, okay, let's draw monsters. And then I've got like multiple pages of different people's monsters in multiple books, and every time they're like, oh my gosh, that was so fun, I wasn't expecting it. And I'm like, yeah, I know, at first you're kind of like, I don't really know, and then you're like, oh wow, these are silly, they're fun, they're quirky, how cool. So I highly recommend it.
Well, you kind of, most people I think kind of think of art as like a solitary activity. You know, it's something you do by yourself. I love the idea of making it into a party game.
Yes, absolutely. And there's quite a few things in the book that is, because it is supposed to be like done in a classroom. So it is supposed to be a group activity. There's one that I really would love to do someday, where like you write out an event ahead of time, something that happened to you in your life, and then you are reading it aloud to the other people in the room, and they listen to the story silently. And then at the end, they draw a picture of something from your story, and they give that to you, and that's their way of communicating to you about your story. And that they don't say, you can't say anything else, you just have the drawing. And I find it so fascinating. Like, that would be so interesting, especially if it was something that is, I mean, I wouldn't want everybody to tell like a deeply personal story if they don't want to, but it would be cool to see what other people think of this life experience you had, but not through words, through drawing.
Oh, I like
That is fabulous. Well, thank you for sharing those with us,
Yeah.
Aubrie.
Of course.
Okay, so I think I'm up next, and I have several. So, because I always choose, how do you pick like 3 to 5 books? It's impossible. So I always have too many. So I'm just going to try to go through them really quickly. The first one I wanted to talk about is the Poorcraft Cookbook by Nero, Villagallos, O'Reilly. This is actually part of a series, kind of. So the creator, C. Spike Trotman, like created the concept behind this, and then a couple of artists have taken it and made different, like, I guess, volumes. It's not necessarily a series. So this is a nonfiction book. This one was done by Nero, Villagallos, O'Reilly, and they like all of the recipes are from this person, and it's super cool. But they have other versions of this book that are like with the same 2 characters. So the characters were the ones that were developed first, and then the other authors take these characters and make these nonfiction books out of them. So there's one for like traveling the world, travel on a budget, that kind of thing. So there's they're nonfiction books that are informational, living finances. They're really good for teens or for new adults. So that 18 to 25-year-old, they might be moving out to a dorm or to their first apartment by themselves.
This is a graphic novel too, right?
It's a graphic novel, nonfiction. It's so good. So I got the Poorcraft Cookbook when I heard about the series, and I am a person in my 30s. And I've been living on my own for a very long time, and I still learned so many new things from this. Like, I didn't know what the difference was, those drawers in your fridge, and they've got like the crisper level, and like you can, one of them's like the veggie drawer, and like that actually means stuff. It actually does stuff, and it has to do with like how a refrigerator cools and how the process works and what parts of the refrigerator are coolest at what time. Like, it's amazing. I learned about the whole first third of this book. So the main character is Penny. She's the one at the stove cooking, and her dog is Nickel. So Penny and Nickel, because they help you be thrifty. And her friend, Penny realized that her friend didn't really have much going on in the kitchen, and her friend was gonna invite her out to eat. And Penny said, "No, let's go shopping. Let's get you set up. Let's get your whole kitchen going and in order." So they go to different shops, and it talks about like what kind of stuff to buy at the dollar store versus your big box store versus your more smaller, more like niche grocers, so they go through all these different stores and what kind of products to buy at which kind of place and how to make the most of your money at all of these locations. And then it discusses your fridge and how you should set that up, common good ways to organize your kitchen in general, how to sharpen knives and scissors. It goes through all of this process for the care and keeping of your kitchen. And then it goes into a whole boatload of recipes, everything from super simple stuff to a little bit more complex, but it's all really accessible and achievable. Each recipe, I think the longest one is 2 full pages, not 2 full spreads, like 2 full pages. And they have everything from like how to make your own sourdough starter to different and I really liked how a lot of the food is kind of cultural, because there's like a curry, and then you'll have like a vegetarian lasagna, and then you'll have like these different breads and different rice, and it's so cool. Highly recommended. It's good for anybody, but if you have any teens or new adults in your life that might be graduating from high high school or college, this would be an excellent gift to give to the teens and new adults in your life. So that's the Poorcraft Cookbook by Nero Villagallos O'Reilly. And then next,
I have a
well,
fun fact also about the other one, but what were you
No,
guys
yeah.
saying?
I was just going to say I'm very much in favor of anything that kind of teaches those basic cooking skills, because I think that there's a lot of people who, because of how produced and how processed our food has become in our society, like don't bother to learn those kinds of things because it's easier to not. But I know that for me, getting older and learning more and more of those skills has been a huge boon. And I also wanted to say that I really love the art style of this. It's very endearing.
It's very cute. Yeah, the two main characters are kind of like that 20s and 30s black and white grayscale, like classic cartoon shape. And then the rest of the cookbook is vibrant and bright, and the contrast is really, really neat.
That's cool. My fun fact was that this book was produced by Iron Circus Comics, and that's the same publisher that published the work that I am credited on for. And they were actually working on this one and the book that I was a part of at the same time. So it's just a little kind of funny.
That is a fun fact.
Yeah.
Now, Aubrie, did you say the name of the book that you're publishing?
No, it's Woman of the Woods. I think it's Woman of the Woods, North American Fables and Fairy Tales.
Actually, I think I have a copy of it right here.
I'm sure you do. Probably. It is a collection of anthology comics by Native American authors and illustrators. And it's absolutely. The one that I worked on with my partner is Into Darkness, I think is what they called their comic. It's very cool. Very cool.
Awesome.
Great. So yeah, the next one that I wanted to talk about. So I finally did it. I finally did the thing, and I read all of Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. I don't generally read manga, but I always kind of wanted to, but every time I had the opportunity, I'd be like, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. So I finally, I'm doing the Book Where I Read Harder challenge this year, which is 24 prompts to help you read more diversely and outside of your comfort zone. And one of the prompts was to read a manga. So the manga I chose was Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. I honestly chose it because the volume 1 is very, very slim. It's very short. It's very fast. And I was like, well, if I don't like it, then I'm not I don't have a whole rest of it to go. I can just stop after the first one. Nope.
Plus, how could you look at that cover though and not want to pick that up?
I know.
I love that so much.
It's so good. I ended up reading all 7 volumes. And so this is a future Earth science fiction dystopia where humans have kind of created an environmental disaster, and now humanity lives in these small communities on the fringes of what's called the Sea of Corruption, which is a type of like mushroom, fungus, moss, and mold forest. Nausicaa is the princess of the people that live in the Valley of the Wind, and she happens to be very in touch with nature, and she's not afraid of the Sea of Corruption. She ventures into it, which it can kill you if you breathe in the spores, like it can make you really sick. But she has a very close relationship, almost a spiritual relationship with nature and with animals. And the plot is wild. There's so much going on that it would be very, very difficult to give a short and sweet synopsis of like what actually happens in the story. But just know that there's a ton of amazing characters that you want to get to know. Absolutely. She is tender and sweet, but also such a cool person to follow. Like, she's a great hero. You want to root for her. She learns a lot of lessons along the way. Parts of this are absolutely scary. I did not realize how scary that some of this would be, and I think it's still appropriate for most of your teenage readers, but some of it is like, whoa, I was not expecting that. The artwork is beautiful. The message is gorgeous. It's full of hope. It's full of kindness. It's full of learning from your mistakes, unlikely alliances. This is, I think I read, and I could be wrong, but I thought this was Hayao Miyazaki's like first manga that he ever made completely on his own and published, which then later was turned into the film that we all know and love through Studio Ghibli. So that's a lot of fun. Like I said, I'm not generally a very big comics reader in general. Sorry, Aubrie.
Not for
and
everybody.
I've been getting more and more into it.
Cool.
But generally, I'm not into comics so much, and manga is like one of my least familiar formats, and I could not put this down. I couldn't get enough of it, so highly recommend. And then next, I've got, I'm cheating because this is 3 books and not 1 book, but this is the Lady Astronaut series by Mary Robinette Kowal. I think I went into it with an expectation. So when I read the first book, I wasn't like the most impressed, but I think I just had like an expectation of what it was going to be. I continued to read the series, and as I kind of settled in and got to know the characters, I think if I went back and reread the first one, I would be much more into it this time around. So this is alternate history, historical fiction, the conceit of which is it's 1952, and a giant meteor strikes the planet Earth just off of the eastern coast of the United States, wiping out Washington, D.C. and most of the eastern seaboard. The strike of the meteor, since the meteor, it's so hot as it enters the atmosphere, it actually boils off a ton of the ocean all at one go, which creates runaway greenhouse gas. So scientists and meteorologists estimate that we have like 6 to 8 decades to get off the planet before it becomes completely inhabitable. So it's the 60s and 50s space race, but it's like we have to colonize, we have to get off of this planet. It discusses so it's the main character in the first 2 books. Her name is Elma York. She is Jewish. She is a woman. She was a computer. So back when computers were actually people that did the computing on paper. And she was also a WASP, which is like the women's air. I can never remember what it means, but basically she flew during World War II. She technically didn't see combat, but she flew over supply lines and transported troops and stuff, and it was very dangerous. So she was a pilot, she was a computer, and she becomes the Lady Astronaut because she is such an advocate for going to space and saving humanity. One of the things I like about the series as a whole is it discusses, well, who gets left behind? Who got left behind after the meteor? Like, who was prioritized during when the government was trying to help people relocate and get out of danger. It discusses race and class, but it does it in a way that, like, by the time you realize that, you're just like, oh, that's what's going on. The third book, The Restless Moon, is really, really cool because it actually takes place between the Calculating Stars and the what's the name of the second book? There's the Calculating Stars. It's going to take a second. The Calculating Stars, the Faded Sky, and the Relentless Moon. So the Calculating Stars and the Faded Sky both follow Elma through her journey as the first Lady Astronaut. And then the Relentless Moon takes place kind of between and during the Faded Sky, and it's a different character that you've met before in the first 2 books, and it becomes like a mystery novel on the moon base. So she's on the moon, and there's sabotage by the Earth Firsters, which is a group of people that are against the space initiative because they're worried that, only the rich people are going to get off the planet and everybody else is going to be left to die, and we need to work on fixing what we can. And it is so good. It was a saboteur spy mystery on the moon colony, and I couldn't put it down. It was so good. So if you like alternative history, if you're interested in the 60s, like mid-century modern dialogue, or like there's a bunch of food that they talk about that it's like, oh, I've seen that in my grandma's old cookbooks, you know. There's a lot to love in these books for sure, and they're pretty fast reads. They kind of look hefty when you pick them up, but they're pretty quick reads. And then next we have Always Been Here. This is a space mystery thriller, and it is not like The Calculating Stars isn't lighthearted, but compared to We Have Always Been Here, it feels lighthearted. We Have Always Been Here follows Grace Park. She is a psychologist. She's the secondary psychologist on a ship that is manned half by humans and half by androids, and they're on their way to a planet supposedly to scout it, because in We Have Always Been Here, humans are already colonizing space. There's already multiple planets with functional, growing, self-sustaining colonies. So there's like a routine mission. We're going to the edge of current known space, and there's this planet that they're just checking to see if it can be valuable to humans and if we could colonize it. Well, for Dr. Grace Park, it turns out that that's not quite the case. And she's like surrounded by people who are going through different nightmares and waking nightmares, and kind of, it almost looks like a psychosis. The androids start acting weird, which is never good. And and nobody will tell her anything because everything is super top secret, need to know, and she is now on the need to know list. So she's trying to figure out this mystery, trying to keep everybody safe as people's mental health kind of deteriorates around her on the ship. She's trying to keep the androids in check and trying to like figure out what's going on with them, because like androids going off kilter is just, it's kind of a spooky thing. But the androids all really like her. So, you know, that's almost spookier than if they don't like you, you know. But it is a really, really cool, this is by Lena and Nguyen, and I highly recommend it if you're into mysteries, thrillers, deep space, speculative fiction. It discusses humanity, what it means to be human. There's flashbacks where you go back and see some of Dr. Park's early memories. So it's got a bunch of really cool stuff in it. Highly recommend. It's a solid sci-fi for sure. And then lastly, I have In the Watchful City by Qiouyi. They wrote this. It's very slim. It's a novella. And it's very experimental in a lot of ways. So it's kind of a sci-fi. It's kind of half solar punk and half cyberpunk. So cyberpunk generally means like dystopic future, like high technology, but also really stratified class systems. And solar punk tends to be like environmentally friendly technology, almost utopic. So in the Watchful City, to combine cyberpunk and solar punk together in one story is really fascinating and interesting. And it's kind of a framed story. So the main character, Anima, is a super sensory, like meta human. They made the choice to join the city as this human computer that's plugged in through a Neuralink, and it can't leave AirPod where they like exist. And there's this person that comes up and has this bureau full of trinkets and invites Anima to select a trinket. And every time Anima selects a trinket, this other person tells a story about that trinket. So it's really experimental. I'm not even sure that I understood it all the way, but it was like really beautifully written. And I would definitely be excited to see more by Liu to come out, because the writing, even though like I mean, it was kind of high level. I'm not sure that I understood everything in this book, but it was just really beautifully written. The prose is gorgeous. The different stories within the story are all really fascinating and emotional. So if you like experimental fiction, if you like sci-fi, this doesn't really feel so much like sci-fi. It's definitely more speculative. But if you're into that kind of experimental, speculative writing, then this is for you.
Sometimes that's nice to get something that kind of goes over your head, because it kind of invites you to reread it even and see it like, what am I missing? And I'm definitely
Absolutely.
intrigued because I've never heard of the concept of solar punk. I've definitely heard of like steampunk and cyberpunk, but that alone kind of interests me, because it makes me wonder, why haven't I heard of this, and what does it really mean? So
Yeah. So solar punk is kind of an aesthetic more than anything. You don't find a whole lot of stories written that could be classified as solar punk, but you see it in art a lot, where you see those utopic cities of the future with the hanging gardens and the vertical farms combined with living space, and it's bright and it's green and it's high tech and it's people, it's environmentally responsible technology that pushes people forward into the future. And as a art aesthetic, I love it. I've always been really into it. I love the idea of like the giant tall spires of buildings with the hanging gardens. Like I've always thought it was really pretty. And this is my first time actually reading it kind of in a book, it was fabulous. Like, even though I might not have understood it, but it touched me somewhere right in my heart, So that is all I had, and we are actually just about out of time. I do want to say, Nia, this is your first time kind of co-hosting with me for book tasting. I'm so glad to have you on the team. Thank you so much. And Aubrie, thank you for joining us. I really enjoyed all your selections, and you are welcome back anytime.
Cool.
Yes. Thank you so much, Aubrie. And yes, thank you, Carly. It was a lot of fun to be part of this, and I'm excited to do more. So
awesome. Well, thank you. And thanks to our listeners and our watchers, everybody who joined in and hung out with us. Thank you for our JDL people in the back who did not talk, but they made everything work and happen. So thanks to everybody who participated, and we will see you at the next book tasting. Bye.